Hey, have you guys been wondering, is all infantry even possible in V3? I think it is. And this is my first initial tutorial about what people who are trying this out, what they're doing. So let's go and watch that. Let me just bring up the inevitable PowerPoint. And here we go. So this is my all infantry tutorial 1.0. There will be others, I guess, as we go, because this is just my initial thoughts, right? I, by nature, I am I'm an academic, right? I'm in my job is teaching. I teach college, and so I approach looking at this game also from a more or less academic standpoint, although not a math one. I don't do much math, but being 1 year into V3, I still feel like I need more data in order to be sure about what is going on when you field an all infantry force. But there are some clues that we can already see. So my disclaimers is I have very limited personal experience, although I have fielded all infantry armies, mostly with my partisans early on in V3. And all infantry here being slightly modified because I do field cavalry usually with my partisans as well. Am I a true all infantry player? I haven't really taken them to major tournaments, so maybe not. We also have very limited stats from events so far, although we do have a couple where all infantry armies attended. The all infantry armies, some of them did really well, some of them didn't. So we don't have like a competitive sort of evaluation of the whole concept yet. But we do have some very good players who are trying to work it out. So Aaron Russell from Australia, he is a absolute world-class star player, right? And he has been working with all infantry or leaning that direction. His last WTC list lent itself very well to that. He had two lists, one American, I believe, and one Japanese. More or less all infantry, both of them, at least without armored platoons, which, was weird at the time. Still is a little bit. Russell Wright has also been testing this out with his air cavalry lists, so American lists, as has Alistair Unicom, who has been on something of a journey of like going through all kinds of different builds here in V3, and others such as Alan Wells, who has done Japanese. He's an incarnated Japanese player, and he's working with, maybe limiting down or doing something different with the armor at least. So I've seen his lists, and many of them lean heavily into the infantry elements. And there are others who've done the same. So what I'm actually seeing in building, well, I'm seeing two types. I'm seeing Japanese and American Soviets. The Japanese have a very specific build so far. They have 3 or more massive sized units of veterans, so most of them will be full-sized, 15 men. So like huge, enormous units, and a bunch of veterans in that respect, right? Because that's 45 plus veterans in your force. They'll also take as many lunge mines as they can afford or can take in their available slots, as much artillery and mortars as well as they can afford because they need the support. Sometimes even take like engineers, flamethrowers, and maybe a couple of transports to bring them up. These extra troops, like the support troops, or even sometimes the massive veteran units. There's a tractor of some sort in the Japanese roster that can actually take 15 guys. Sometimes you'll see that taken as a way of throwing up these huge units into where they need to go, into the center of the board or like towards the opponent. So that's the Japanese build. If we look at the Americans and the Soviets, they have specialist veterans, right? So stubborn veterans for the Americans mostly, and infiltrating veterans for the Soviets, which I know, yes, it is going to go away, the whole spamming out scouts. But if the scouts actually get the Pathfinders rule, or Rangers rule, Rangers lead the way from the American list, that's more or less the same, right? It means that you can push them up early in the game. It's a way of pushing up. Which the Americans, of course, have with Rangers lead the way. So there is something there with having your veterans fairly far up the table early game and having extra rules on them. Stubborn helps, infiltration helps. And then for both of these armies, they have pretty cheap access to anti-tank assets, bazookas for the Americans, Fausts and dog mines for the Soviets. And at the same time, they also have a pretty neat supporting unit in the air observers or the artillery observers, both of which, by the way, can be taken veteran infiltrators with extra dudes. So they can sort of become the same unit, although very expensive, that the other veterans are. Sometimes you'll see these platoons with a company commander as well, because one of the things that one of my very good friends, Michael C., he's been running all infiltrating Soviets like forever, since somewhere in V2. He loves his scouts. Very sad to see them go. One of the things that he figured out when V3 came out was that he really needed the support of some morale bonus. So he quite quickly added a company commander to his all-forward infiltrating Soviets. And I think it's the same for the Americans, because one of the things that can happen to you is that you can get bogged down in pins. So a company commander sometimes will keep those armies going. What are the advantages of these all-infantry armies? Well, one, veterans are pretty tough, right? And with the demise of the Dhaka tanks, the Dhaka stewards, especially, the tools are just not there to remove massive amounts of infantry in one go. There are still certain vehicles that can do a little bit of that, but the tanks were typically in V2 were the main threat to large blobs of infantry. As was, by the way, MSU, multiple small units, was also a huge threat, but I'll get to that in a moment. So the demise of the Dhaka tanks has made this more viable, I think. Also, the fact that a lot of players are experimenting with a little bit heavier tanks, so 9+ tanks. They are being taken. There's a lot of Death Star tanks being taken, and that Death Star tanks or heavier tanks are really bad at dealing with an ocean of infantry, because that's not what they're there for, right? They're there to soak up damage from other tanks and to threaten other tanks. They're not really there to cut down hordes of infantry. Also, I think the fact that most of the time you can go down, which will increase your cover save, that means that these large units of veterans will typically lose like a couple of guys every time you shoot at them, but not be massively damaged by shots. So that combination is really, really beneficial for veterans, especially in cover. I also think that the tables have evolved to benefit all infantry armies a little bit. In some respects, not at all, and in some respects, a little bit. They will get hit more, right? They'll get hit a lot more. They'll be pinned a lot more than they used to in V2, but they'll have cover saves almost all the time, which means that, you know, if it's hard cover, half of the kills just go away, which is nifty and nice, especially for veterans where you're taking off a third, 2/3 of the hits, and then, you know, you can take half that again. So it gets really difficult to inflict massive casualties on large groups of veterans. And just the fact that you can buy a lot of bodies for 130 points, which is what most tanks cost, right? You can get a lot of veterans for that. So can the veterans outlast the tanks? That's the main question mark here, right? Also, I think the specific armies that I see people do this with are chosen because anti-tank is plentiful and it's quite disposable. Right? You can throw it up and throw it away and forget about it. So we have nations that have multi-choices that can take multiple choices of some anti-tank choices, like the lunge mines for the Japanese or the dog mines for the Soviets. And the ability to now tap into heavy weapons platoons where you have gazillion choices of anti-tank weapons. As long as you have points, you can take as many as you want, right? That means that you have so much anti-tank, which was the main threat to infantry, but now with the advent of so much anti-tank, that sort of leverages the playing field a little bit. It becomes a little bit more level, and the all-infantry army is a little bit better off. Also, there are new choices that can really damage tanks that are coming out and that are cheap and points for value pretty good. So for the Germans, and I'm still waiting to see an all-infantry German army, but bear with me, they have the Eintos Flammenwerfer. One-shot flamethrowers. Flamethrowers have always been dangerous to tanks because of the morale test. The morale test will kill that tank. The Sturmpistole is also pretty good. It's a 3+, and if you can get into the side or rear, that's better than the AT rifle, right? So if you can get them up there, you have some pretty nifty tools. So I think potentially we could in the future see experiments with all-infantry German armies. What are the disadvantages of an all-infantry army? Well, everything can kill your dudes, right? Everything on the table. Artillery is focused on it. The only thing that's not focused on killing your dudes specifically is AT guns, right? Everything else can kill your dudes and do it well. Much better than your dudes can kill them back, right? So that's a problem. That's a real problem. You are going to lose men every single game. Get used to picking up your dudes and putting them back on the tray, right? Because that'll happen a lot. You're also going to get pinned because everything can pin your dudes. Even AT guns can shoot that HE1 and give you a couple of pins, right? So you'll get pinned a lot, especially in V3 since pins are so easy to come by, and like the changes to the shooting rules, the changing to the ranges of weapons, to the proliferation of certain types of arms, all of that has meant that pins are a lot easier to come by. Now, they're also a lot easier to manage, which, I'll get back to that. But it is one thing that you have to be able to manage. Also, one of the things we learned quite early in V3 is that movement on foot is quite costly. You're going to get pinned, you're going to get shot at, you're going to lose dudes every time you move. It was one of the things that early on really bugged me about V3 because it meant that the game became a little static. Now, we have sort of started developing ways to deal with that. More terrain, mechanized, cavalry, units that can be where you want them to be, infiltrating, whatever. So we have started developing things that can deal with that fact that movement is costly. But it still is costly. So how do you advance? How do you move up? You are going to need to move up in order to get up where you win games, right? You can't just sit back in your deployment zone. You have to have a plan for how to get up. You also have to have a plan for how to deal with armor because, you might have 15 plus veterans, but if all they can do to a tank is stun it, then, well, that tank is not going to care, right? It's going to wait until you have 5 pins, and then it's going to tank rush you and crush your veterans, right? So how do you deal with armor? Do you buy AT grenade? I haven't seen this done a lot, although I'm still waiting for someone to do it. Or do you buy Fausts? Or how do you deal with it? How do you threaten that armor away so it doesn't run over you? That's the main point. You have to have a plan for that as well. And you have to avoid getting pinned down, of course. And one of the problems with that is if you have 15 veterans, those 15 men take up a large section of the table. That's a big footprint for a unit. So, and having a big footprint means that they're difficult to hide, which means that everything can shoot at you, which means that they're going to get pinned, they're going to get shot at. And it also means that in kill point missions, you might struggle sometimes. Yeah, your large units of veterans will live through everything, but the support units that you have, the teams of AT assets, the mortars and all of that is pretty vulnerable in kill points. So it may actually not be great to have these armies in kill points. I need more data on that. I'm just spitballing here. I'm just guessing, because it was one of the things that I figured out quite early with my partisans, was that I, like my large units of veterans with SMGs and all of that, the enemy would just pin me down and then try to kill my small teams. So I'm guessing a lot of these top players who are experimenting with all infantry armies have sort of similar experiences. Kill points, you may struggle. So what are the tactical pointers I think we can sort of take away right now? Huge caveats with this one, right? You can overcome some of the disadvantages. You have to have a way of getting up there, right? Whether it's transport, whether it's infiltration, whether it's Rangers lead the way, some sort of way of getting up there. That's important, because getting up there into the center of the table is where the veterans start winning points, start taking objectives, start killing units. You also have to have a way of managing pins, which, is pretty easy with officers, but the officers themselves become very, very vulnerable. And you have to have a way of threatening armor, which again is why people are taking US, Soviets, and Japanese, right? They're not taking the Japanese for their ability to kill armor, but for their ability to threaten armor, right? The lunge mines are not very killy, but they are threatening, which will keep the armor at bay. And then you can leverage your advantages, which is you're very hard to kill. At least those big units of veterans are very, very hard to kill. And you may be too many to kill as well. Like there may not be enough time and shots in the enemy's army to kill all those dudes. Like just pure math, they may not have enough shots to kill you. So going down in terrain will absolutely boost this hard to kill, too many to kill, right? And sometimes if you can get them too stubborn to run, like having those fanatics or stubborn units, that's pretty much a huge benefit, because so if the enemy can't kill you, then they might try to morale you off the table somehow, right? But if you have those abilities, that's not going to happen. You're just going to stay there, get shot, and slowly get whittled down until time runs out and you win the game. And then you have to view anti-tank assets as a threat, not as something that actively goes hunting, because most of the time you're not going to be able to do that. So those are my tactical pointers for how to run all infantry armies. I look forward to seeing myself get torn to shreds in the comments for all the people out there who know better than me. But as it is, thank you so much, Alistair, who started this thought process in my head. Let me know where you are. Write it in the comments. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers.